scripture's almost over, that verse. So upon the face of the earth. So we understand that. You have to understand. Just like your little brothers, when you play your favorite games, when you do the favorite things, God has favorites. And he chose you. He chose you as the favorite. The song goes like the Hispanic man, woman, and child of Negroid and Indian descent. You are the dear children of God, the Hebrew Israelites that the Bible speak about. And know this to be true. Wake up unto your heritage, unto the Lord, statutes and commandments. Thus saith the Lord. Thus saith the Lord. Ready to talk? You keep teaching. Keep teaching while you do. Keep teaching. Yes.
All right, get Isaiah chapter 9, verse 6. Read that.
Isaiah chapter 9, verse 6.
And
For unto us a child is born.
so now unto us, the children of Israel, you so-called blacks, Western, and Hispanics, a child was born. Go ahead.
Unto us a son is given.
Now unto us, you so-called blacks, Western, and Hispanics, a son was given. Go ahead. And who's that son? Jesus Christ. Go ahead.
And the government shall be upon his shoulders.
So now the government is upon Christ's shoulders. And what government that we're part of? The government of God and Jesus Christ. That's the laws that we are holding. That's what laws that we are following. The laws and the commandments of the Heavenly Father. What about chasing out the drug dealer?
Shalom, shalom. Shalom, Yasharala. Shalom, Mashapaka. Ashar Shabbat. So, here we go, man. This is what we've been waiting on. As you all know, or probably don't know, I'm Ambassador Ahban Ahrayah, and I'm joined by Ambassador Barak from our Chicago camp. Chicago in the house.
Shalom.
And hey, first of all, we just want First of all, we just want to really wish all our people, all the children of Yasharala, the Most High's people, a blessed Sabbath, and a blessed month and a blessed year. A lot of crazy things going on. But the scriptures tell us to stand in the secret place when we see all these things going on. None of this stuff should be new. None of this stuff should be a surprise. Everything that's happening now, scripture said it's going to happen. I tell you what surprises me, though, one of the biggest things at first, because I wasn't really paying attention to it. With all the things that are going on as far as the agendas that are being pushed, one of the biggest things that are being pushed right now is trying to discredit the word. And most I talked about that, but the scriptures can never be discredited, man. Never. This is the Most High we talking about. We ain't talking about just a man, because he ain't a man. Scripture says he's not a man that he should lie. So everything in that word, you got to believe. All right. So let's have a little fun with it, man. Let's have a little fun tonight. Barak, how we doing?
We doing Tawab, King. I'm just glad the Most High, you know what I'm saying, got me here to be on this class, you know.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We want to thank everybody that's tuning in, wherever you may be. This is a little different. This is the first time we've really done an at-length class on this topic. You know, when I started to read this, I was like, okay, we already understood what this was about. You know, what leprosy was, and why the Most High did what he did. And you know, I figured, okay, straight class, we'll have a good time with it. Man, the Most High is wonderful. Most High is wonderful. The way he opens up your understanding of why he does what he does, and just the pure righteous nature of it. It's incredible. And so we thank him for allowing us to be able to spread this word, for being chosen through the Mashiach Yahushua. So yeah, let's sit back. You know, we're not gonna be like the ladies, man. So there ain't gonna be no Cavassier, none of that kind of stuff. Let's sit back and let's enjoy ourselves. The topic tonight is leprosy. So we're gonna be doing, or rather going through Leviticus 13, dealing with the laws of leprosy. Leviticus, as we know, basically is a chapter of laws, various laws that it spells out, from laws ranging from how to deal with your brother, laws on murder, laws on sexual immorality, and laws on purity and clean and unclean. So this particular chapter, Leviticus 13 and Leviticus 14, basically deals with leprosy and the not only the cleansing of it, but why it happens, and just to get a total understanding of what it is. Because if we leave it to the modern day explanations, they take the Most High completely out of it. All right. So let's just go into this, relax, sit back, and let's do this. All right. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to read something real quick that I found. Now, we know that leprosy was all through the Bible, the Old Testament and the New Testament. If we go into the New Testament, we see that the Mashiach actually cleansed lepers, 10, I believe, at one point. So we knew that leprosy was a thing that was from the Old Testament, way back when. If we look at the modern day explanation or medical explanation of what leprosy is, they completely sidetrack what the Most High said it is. But we're gonna deal with that. So when you look,
So like y'all, I think Ahban had cut out. On 1 second here.
what's going on? Yeah, we got a bad
Oh,
connection.
okay. We got it back in. Okay, come.
We got a bad connection. All right. So leprosy comes from the Greek word lepros, okay, meaning scaly, or lepro, meaning to peel off or to scale. So it's basically a disease that affects the skin and the nervous system. Now, here's the strange part about that. When you look at certain forms of leprosy, albinism could be considered a form of leprosy. We know that in the scriptures that some of the people that we're going to go over tonight got struck with leprosy, but it wasn't the leprosy of the boils and the scaly skin. It was just the color. And if you notice what people who are albino, for some reason, their eyes are always either twitching or moving, or they're fast, rapid blinking. And that's because leprosy affects not only the skin, but the nervous system. And so that's why you see that in albinos. We're going to talk about what they said Michael Jackson had, vitiligo, if I'm pronouncing it right. If I butchered it, oh well, I don't got it. And that's a form of leprosy as well. And then we're going to talk about Esau, which is also a form of leprosy. Now you'll hear, I'm going to go over some things where you'll hear their definitions of why they are the way that they are, and they're going to give their medical expertise, but we believe what the Most High says. All right, so as I said, leprosy is a Greek word. It comes from the Greek word lepros, and it's basically a contagious bacterial infection that affects the skin and the nervous system. Now, you'll see a lot of pictures. I don't know if, Barack, you can put up a picture of a person with leprosy where there are different forms of leprosy, and there are different levels to leprosy. You had the leprosy where it's just a skin color deficiency, and you have leprosy where there are boils and bumps and pus and people who just lose limbs behind it, because technically it is a disease. Now, going back in the days, leprosy was a big thing, and it was to be feared. The reason it was to be feared was because when you had leprosy, okay, two things affected you. One, it was a social effect, and two, it was a religious effect. Now, she has a form of leprosy right here. Okay, I don't know if you can see that. Can you see that? All right, that's a form of leprosy. Okay, now she would be considered a clean leper. Okay, she still has leprosy, but she would be considered a clean leper because you have clean and you have unclean. Okay, her leprosy that she has is obviously not contagious. Then you have the leprosy that attacks the skin and the nerves and the hair and things like that, and we're going to go over that as well. So she would be considered a clean leper. Okay, this could be considered vitiligo because of the patches of white skin. Now notice the whole area of her body is not that color, or not melanin deficient. Okay, and that's what you call a dilution gene, and we'll go into what a dilution gene is too as well. All right, so to continue, this guy, Dr. Hansen. Now, Dr. Hansen, they say he discovered leprosy in Norway. And about, let me see what he said about it was 1870 or 1874, somewhere around there. He was looking for an unknown bacteria in the skin of people who were lepers. And he found this unknown bacteria. And because he found it, they named it after him. So you may not hear the word leprosy anymore. What you'll hear is Hansen's disease. And strangely enough, though, they'll say that Hansen's disease is not the leprosy of old, but I'm going to show you that it was. I'm going to show you that it was. So this is where that came from. Okay, so if you hear Hansen's disease, just think leprosy in your mind. So moving on. Now, there were several people who were struck by leprosy in the Bible. Several notable people like Miriam. Now, leprosy was, let me go back to Miriam real quick. When the Most High wants to make a point, and when the Most High wants to do what I call corrective therapy, because there's two things he can do. He can correct you or he can kill you. So when he does what I like to call corrective therapy, he does something to get your attention. Now, when you transgress against the Most High, transgression can come in many, many forms. The forms that we hardly ever talk about are your thoughts. Now, we know it comes in deeds. When you murder somebody without a righteous cause, when you commit adultery, when you do all these things, believe it or not, all of these things started with a thought. You had to think about actually doing it before you set off and did it. So thought is very, very important when we talk about transgressing the Most High's laws. Now, when you look at the story of Miriam, bring it up real quick. Get that for me, Barak Baba Kushah. The story of Miriam. When you look at the story of Miriam, and her getting leprosy, give me Numbers 12 and 15. Let's start there. Let's start at Numbers 12 and 15. Because I want to show you why she actually got the leprosy. You know what I mean? And why the Most High chose to do that particular thing. Now understand, when you are a leper, you got it?
Yeah, I got it. You want me to read
12,
it?
15.
Okay.
Go ahead. Read that.
This is the book of Numbers, chapter 12, verse 15. And Miriam was shut out from the camp 7 days. And the people journeyed not till Miriam was brought in again. 16.
Go a little bit above that. Go a little bit above that. Yeah.
We could start at verse 7.
Yeah, start there.
Okay, come. This is the book of Numbers, chapter 12, verse 7. My servant Moses is not so, who is faithful in all mine house. With him will I speak mouth to mouth, even apparently, and not in dark speeches. And the similitude of the Most High shall he behold. Wherefore, then, were he not afraid to speak against my servant Moses? And the anger of the Most High was...
Go ahead, continue.
Oh, and the anger of the Most High was kindled against him, and he departed. And the cloud departed from the tabernacle.
Okay, so stop. So to just give you a gist of what's happening, so the Most High was dealing with Moses and telling Moses what he needed to do and give the instruction because Moses was he was a Levite, so he was of the priestly line. Now the Most High was giving him instructions and telling him things to do. Now, as there is in every family, you're gonna have some people that's, you know what I mean, not gonna understand certain things, and it's gonna get a little bit jealous, you know, and they spoke against Moses because their thing was, well, wait, so you the only one that got this kind of pull with the Most High? You know what I mean? You the only one from the priestly line? Like he ain't talked to us? We them people too. And the Most High was like, wait a minute, man. This dude is different. I'm speaking to this dude this way for a reason. What I like Yosemite Sam from the cartoon. I don't know if y'all know Bugs Bunny. Like Yosemite Sam always says, what I got to say, I'm saying with lead. Most High was saying the same thing. What I got to say to Moses, I'm saying straight to Moses. I'm not going to talk to him the way that I talk to the other prophets and priests and things of that nature. I'm speaking to him in a different way. Because number one, the Most High knew who he was and why he called him, and he also knew what he had to do and what he had already done. So Most High got vexed with them, and Miriam decided that she ain't like what the Most High was, the way the Most High was dealing with her, was dealing with Moses. So she was going to open her mouth and you know what I mean? Now, if you look at all the things that the Most High could have done, what he did was he put her in a situation where she would have to be separated. But then the mercy still came because after she was separated, nobody did nothing. Everybody just chilled until Miriam got better. Because remember, when you become a leper, two things happen. You're separated ritually and you're separated physically. Ritually, because everybody in that camp, right, is not struck with that disease, and the Most High deals with that camp. He's inside. His presence is inside that camp. So now, by Miriam being unclean, she had to go outside of the camp. They had to put her out. Now, here's the funny part about that. The leprosy that she got struck with, you could call albinism, or maybe something of a dilution gene, where there's an absence of pigmentation, where one or more cells, they get together and they synthesize or they produce like little, almost no pigment at all. That's what he struck her with. Now she already had pigment, but he struck her with no pigment, which also begs the question, well then what color was she before that? For those whitewashers, but we'll get into that some other time. So anyway, Miriam had to be put out the camp, okay? And that was because she spoke against Moses. Now the leprosy, like I said, the leprosy that she got hit with was, I would say, albinism. Now there's another famous dude that also got hit with leprosy, and it was King Uzziah, who was the captain of the host of the Syrian army, of the Syrian king. And he also got struck with, he also was a leper because he had leprosy, but he was a clean leper. And when we start to read from 13:1, you're gonna see clean and unclean. All right. Then you had, again, like I said, the 10 lepers that the Mashiach cleansed, who he was a priest. Now the priest back in those days couldn't cleanse the leper. That's why they had to pray to the Most High to get that off of Miriam. But this priest, the one true priest, the priest of all priests, after the order of Melchizedek, he was able to do that. Gun? All right. So there were a couple of other people too that we'll get into Job a little bit. We'll deal with that, but we'll talk about, because he also, if you think about it, when we start going through it, you'll see that he will also hit with a form of leprosy as well. So let's dig in now. Let's go into Leviticus chapter 13. Let's start at the first verse. And let's go on down to, stop at the end of the second.
This is the book of Leviticus, chapter 13, verse 1. And the Most High spake unto Moses and Aaron, saying, when a man shall have in the skin of his flesh a rising, a scab, or a bright spot, and a scab, or bright spot, and it be in the skin of his flesh, like the plague of leprosy, then he shall be brought unto Aaron the priest, or unto one of his sons, the priest.
What's going on? I think we're having a really bad connection. You hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Man, this is not good. Hold on. Okay. All right. Read that one more time. I may have to switch to my read that one more time.
It's Leviticus chapter 13, verse 1. And the Most High spake unto Moses and Aaron, saying, when a man shall have in the skin of his flesh a rising, a scab, or a bright spot, and it be in the skin of his flesh, like the plague of leprosy, then he shall be brought unto Aaron the priest, or unto one of his sons the priest.
Okay, so when we look at verse 2, it says, when a man shall have in the skin of his flesh. It's talking about the skin and the flesh. So we're talking about the surface of the skin and underneath the surface. And it says a rising, a scab, or a bright spot. Now, when it talks about a rising, if you look at the medical definition of leprosy, it does say that the beginning symptoms of leprosy is when the skin starts to swell. There's a rising of the skin. So we know that that's 1 point for the Bible. It talks about a scab. Now, normally, when you see a scab on a cut, what does that mean? Especially when it starts to get dark and it's a little scab, like say on a little cut. That means that the wound or the trauma that was to heal. That's what happens when you see a scab. That means that whatever trauma or cut or bruise and that's why it goes over it. It's protecting it and healing the wound at the same time. So it says when you see those three things or a bright spot. Now, a lot of times with leprosy, you may see blotches, white blotches. Or that model that the ambassador Barak put up. That's also a form of leprosy. But it'll talk about the surface of the skin or going underneath the skin into the actual flesh. All right. So now it tells you they have to be brought to the priest. Why is that? Because one, the priests were the ones that were getting their information or their instructions from the Most High. So the Most High was best to tell them how to diagnose it, because that's why they went to the priest. The people that sent them there, or when they came to the priest, they didn't know what it was. It was the priest's job to diagnose it. That's one. Now, with that diagnosis, they have to determine, one, whether it is leprosy, two, whether it's clean or unclean, and three, if it's unclean or clean, do they have to depart from the camp? Because that wasn't always have to be put out of the camp like Miriam was. And I'm going to show you, we're getting ready to get into it. So then the question is going to be asked, well, then why wasn't Miriam shut up? Well, let me not give it away. Let's go on and read that. Start at go to 3.
Okay, God. This is verse 3. And the
3,
priest
King. Yes.
And the priest shall look on the plague in the skin of the flesh. And when the hair in the plague is turned white, and the plague in sight be deeper than the skin of his flesh, it is a plague of leprosy. And the priest shall look on him and pronounce him unclean. Oh, I think the brothers having connection issues. Let me read that one more time. This is the book of Leviticus, chapter 13, verse 3. And the priest shall look on the plague in the skin of his flesh, in the skin of the flesh. And when the hair in the plague is turned white,
Salat, King, you got to read that over. I'm having a really bad signal problem here.
Yeah, Con. I'll read it over for you.
It's oh my God.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Salat, read that one more time. I'm having a real bad signal problem here, so it's starting to freeze up a lot. So let's read verse 3 again.
Okay, Con. And the priest shall look on the plague of the skin of the flesh, and when the hair in the plague is turned white, and the plague in sight be deeper than in the skin of his flesh, it is a plague of leprosy. And the priest shall look on him and pronounce him unclean.
It says, verse 3 says, and when the priest on the plague in the skin of the flesh. So what it's talking about, oh my God, this thing is Salak. I'm so sorry. This thing is freezing up on me. Hello? All right.
Yeah,
back? I'm
freezing
up I'm freezing up so badly. Can you hear me?
Yeah, Con, I can hear you.
All right. I don't know why it's doing this. All right, one more time, verse 3 real quick.
Okay. And the priest shall look on the plague in the skin of the flesh, and when the hair in the plague is turned white, and the plague in sight be deeper than the skin of his flesh, it is a plague of leprosy, and the priest shall look on him and pronounce him unclean.
Okay, so here's how it's describing this certain type of leprosy. As we go down, you'll see not all leprosy was like this. So it was talking about the skin of the flesh. Now we're talking about the skin, which is the surface, and we're talking about underneath the skin. And it says, if the skin of the flesh and the hair in that patch of skin. Now, let's say you had a white patch of skin, okay, on your arm, and the hair within that white patch turns white. That's what it was talking about. Like the plague of leprosy, then you got to bring them to the priest. Now, you don't know what it is yet. And that's why you go to the priest, so that they could determine whether or not it's leprosy, and if it is it clean or unclean. So it's giving you the parameters in order to decide if it's leprosy or not. Now it says, and the priest shall look on him and pronounce him unclean. So we know, let's take this into account. We know, keep this in mind. A patch of white with the hair turning white is leprosy and unclean. Now you would say, okay, well, unclean lepers, you got to be put out the camp. Aha, aha, not so. Let's keep going. Verse 4.
Verse 4. If the bright spot
Now remember,
be
he's
white,
unclean. Go.
if the bright spot be white in the skin of his flesh, and in sight be not deeper than the skin, and the hair thereof be not turned white, then the priest shall shut up him that hath the plague 7 days.
Now you see that? You see where the distinction is? You see where the separation is? Now still talking about the white on the skin. But in this case, if it doesn't go deeper than the surface of the skin and the hair on that patch doesn't turn white, then he gets shut up for 7 days. A completion is 7 days. So he's seen by the priest, and the priest says, okay, yeah, you got this white patch, but it's not deeper than the surface of the skin, and the hair didn't turn white. Now, although that is commonly the plague of leprosy, he gets shut up into a room, not out the camp, because it doesn't specify out the camp. Now keep reading. Watch where it goes.
Verse 5.
Verse 5.
And the priest shall look on him the 7th day, and behold, if the plague in his sight be at a stay, and the plague spread not in the skin, then the priest shall shut him up 7 days more.
Okay, so what it's saying now in verse 5 is that, all right, say we got that white patch on our arm, right? And the 7 days is gone, and the priest comes back and he looks at the person, right? He looks at the dude like, all right, let me see what you look like. Now, if the white patch, if the disease doesn't go underneath the surface of the skin, and if it doesn't spread anyplace else, then the priest said, all right, we might have something here. Let me shut him up another 7 days, just to make sure. Just to make sure. Because now it's not the question of whether or not he has leprosy. It's a question of whether it's clean or unclean. Because he ain't outside the camp yet. All right. So now he gets shut up another 7 more days. Now remember, that's 7 days completion. Now here's 7 more days after what the priest has already seen. Okay, it didn't go under the surface, and there is no, it didn't move anywhere. It didn't get bigger. You know what I mean? His whole face ain't white. So let me shut him up 7 more days, and let's see how it works after that. Let's see what we're dealing with. You know, like the modern day doctor, only much better. All right, go ahead. Verse 6.
Verse 6. And the priest shall look on him again the 7th day, and behold, if the plague be somewhat dark, and the plague spread not in the skin, the priest shall pronounce him clean, but it is a scab.
Stop. Exactly. Now, what I told you earlier about scabs. Scabs are usually there, or they usually form when there is a healing process that's starting. And we've all seen it, how the scabs get a little darker than our skin color, our normal skin tone. Mm-hmm. So he's saying now, the scriptures are saying that after this second 7th day, so now it's 14 days now. All right. He said he'd get him the 7th day, and then he looked back. Okay, cool. And he come back after the next 7 day. Okay, cool. And it's telling you that if it's somewhat dark and it didn't spread throughout the skin, then what? The priest shall pronounce him what? Clean. So you see the difference. There is a clean and an unclean leper. And if you look at it, as we go down, you'll see that they pretty much got the same symptoms in a lot of these cases. And you'll see it as we go along. All right. But it says he'll pronounce him clean, and it's but a scab. And what? And he shall wash his clothes and be clean. I'm going to talk about the clothes because you're going to hear some words that sound kind of crazy, like warp, and woof, but that's going to be dealing with fabric and patterns. We're going to talk about that as we go down. All right. So let's go to 7, verse 7. Let's read 7 real quick because I don't know when this thing is going to start acting up.
Okay, come. Verse 7. But if the scab spread much abroad in the skin, after he hath been seen of the priest for his cleansing, he shall be seen of the priest again.
Okay, so now let's say the scab, you get the scab right there, boom. Now all of a sudden, the scab is starting to spread. After we already dealt with, all right, this is what you got to do to clean yourself. Wash your clothes, this, that, and the third. After we done did all that, man, the scab is starting to spread a little bit. That might not be a scab. So now, what's got to happen? We got to go back before the priest. This is already after we dealt with how you're supposed to get that cleaning, okay? Because remember, the priest already pronounced them clean. Already pronounced them. So now all you got to do is go through the cleaning ritual. Remember I said it was a ritual separation as much as a physical separation. So now you got to go through a ritual cleaning. Right? So now it says you got to be seen of the priest again. Verse 8.
And if the priest see that, behold, the scab spreadeth in the skin, then the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is a leprosy.
See that? You see that? So not only are we dealing with color or the deficiency of color, but we're dealing with surface disease. We're dealing with surface bacteria. We're dealing with bacteria of the flesh. And we're also dealing with scabs and scalds. Now, we're going to get into scalds in a minute. We're coming down to it. All right? So now, it is no joke. It is plain as day. This dude got leprosy. Now, watch now, verse 9.
Verse 9. When the plague of leprosy is in a man, then he shall be brought unto the priest. Keep reading.
Unto the priest, right?
Yeah, come.
Now, in this situation, let's just separate this situation. This dude was already brought to the priest, so it's just reiterating that that's what has to happen, and it's also showing you that once that determination is made, that's what has to happen. So it's just reiterating it. Now go on 10.
Verse 10. And the priest shall see him, and behold, if the rising be white in the skin, and it
now remember what I told you earlier. Some of the symptoms of leprosy is a swelling of the skin and whiteness. So they're giving you the parameters in which the priest is going to determination at this point. Go.
Behold, if the rising be white in the skin, and it have turned the hair white, and there be quick raw flesh in the rising.
Stop. See, now we're going into a different type of leprosy. This is a different type of leprosy. Now we're going into the contagious, infectious leprosy. Because now it's starting to talk about, remember, one was a deficiency of color. Let's just use the word albinism for now. But one was a deficiency of color. That's why it made a point to say, wait a minute, if the hair is not white, but the patch is white, but if the hair is white and the patch is white, obviously it's the infection in the skin that's causing the hair molecules to lose their pigmentation. So that's the leprosy part of it. Now it's going into the infectious, contagious part of it. That's why if you look at the scriptures, lepers were put outside the camp. Now, Miriam was put outside the camp. She didn't have the raw and all this kind of stuff, but she was put outside the camp because, she was being a jerk off. You know what I mean? Like, don't talk against my man. You know what I mean? So, because think about it. What else reason was she put out the camp? She didn't have, the Bible did not describe her having no raw flesh, no pus, no none of that. She just turned white. Which gives me an idea of who should be put out this country, but we'll talk about that some other time. Anyway, so now we're talking about raw flesh. Now we're talking about the leprosy that becomes contagious. Because again, like I described to you, it's a bacterial infection. So now we're talking about that. Go on to 11.
Verse 11. It is an old leprosy in the skin of his flesh, and the priest shall pronounce him unclean and shall not shut him up, for he is unclean.
See that? So now, where do you see the difference? Now, before, when it was just the white patch and a little bit of the scab and it wasn't moving, it didn't spread, he was shutting them up because he was like, oh, let me determine now if it's a scab or if it is leprosy. And then when it started to spread, then he was like, okay, you got leprosy. But this dude ain't no shutting up for you, homie. You got to go. You got to bounce. You got to bounce out the camp. Why? Not because they wanted to be jerk-offs, but because it was contagious. It was a disease. It was contagious. That's why. All right, keep going.
Verse 12. And if
verse
leprosy,
12.
and if a leprosy break out abroad in the skin, and the leprosy cover all of the skin of him that hath the plague from his head even to his foot, wheresoever the priest looketh.
You hear me, but I'm going to read it. Leviticus chapter 13, verse 12. And if a leprosy break out abroad in the skin, and the leprosy cover all the skin of him that hath the plague from his head even to his foot, wheresoever the priest looketh, then the priest shall consider, and behold, if the leprosy have covered all his flesh, he shall pronounce him clean that hath the plague. It is all turned white. He is clean. See that? You see that? So these are the people who now they reverted back to another form of leprosy where it's just the color. That's what Miriam had. Because remember, the scripture said he pronounced him clean because what? He is turned white all over as far as the priest can see, but he pronounced him clean. That's the leprosy that Miriam had. That's also the leprosy that the Syrian dude Uzziah had. That's the same leprosy. It didn't describe any sores, any boils, nothing. We're going to get into the fretting boils. We're going to get into all of that, the burning boils and all that. We won't get into that. So 13 says, at the end of 13, it says, it is all turned white. He is clean. So he's a clean leper. Go on.
Go on. 14. But when the raw flesh appeareth in him, he shall be unclean.
See, 14 says, but when raw flesh appears, then he shall be unclean. So now let's say, you were white all over, and the priest looked at you and on the back of your elbow that he saw some raw flesh. You got to go. Because now you got a different form of the leprosy, or you got a different level, if you will, of the leprosy. It's no longer oh,
he froze up. I think this is what I'll show this picture. I think this might be like the form of like when they have raw flesh right here. So this is the different types of forms of leprosy right here. And they have that one.
there you go. Look at that. See that?
Yeah.
Now notice, what do you notice about that? That's the raw flesh, but look at his skin. Look at the skin. See how it's some. But now this cat here, or whoever owned them have to get out the camp. You got to bounce. Not a matter of you being a good person. It's a matter of you being able to infect other people. Because they even say, if you really look at it, they say that the modern day leprosy can be spread through the air. It can be spread through sneezes, through the air. Now, we've been on this earth for a long time, and all types of stuff is in the air, and most of us ain't never caught none of it. So 2 points for the Most High. So that's a good picture right there about the water. So go to
16, I think.
I'll do it. And the priest shall see the raw flesh and pronounce him to be unclean, for the raw flesh is unclean. It is leprosy. Or if the raw flesh white, he shall come unto the priest. And the priest shall see him, and behold, if the plague be turned into white, then the priest shall pronounce him clean. And now, to get an understanding of that, what it's saying is, if you got the raw flesh, and let's say that raw flesh healed, and what's left is just the whiteness of the skin, you can be healed. Now, when it talks about plague, it may not necessarily be the leprosy, the physical leprosy per se, because remember, the word plague also means a continuing ailment or distress or a continuing problem. In this case, a medical problem. The leprosy is continuing because you got it every day. So when we hear plague, the word plague, it may not always mean that it's the physical leprosy that it's talking about. It could just be the condition of it being ongoing. And then you're going to see that as we go. Okay, so 16 said, and he shall come unto the priest, and the priest shall see him, and behold, if the plague be turned into white, shall pronounce him clean that hath the plague. And if your situation reverses, still be a leper, leprosy. But again, it's almost like having herpes but not having an outbreak. You still got it, but without an outbreak, you can't infect anybody. So, and I don't know if that's a good analogy, but that's pretty much how it works. 18. Go, King. 18.
Verse 18. The flesh also, in which even in the skin thereof was a boil, and is healed.
Go ahead.
And in the place of the boil, there be a white rising, or a bright spot, white, and somewhat reddish, and it shewed to be, and it be shewed to the priest.
Go ahead.
And if when the priest seeth it, behold, it be in sight lower than the skin, and the hair thereof be turned white, the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is a plague of leprosy broken out of the boil.
Okay, now what they're talking about, what that boil is talking about, is there's something, if you look in the medical books, there's something called a burning boil. Okay, and what that is it's an infection that it affects groups of hair follicles. Okay, it affects groups of hair follicles and like any nearby tissue. So when it's talking about the flesh, all even in the skin thereof was a boil, it's talking about that burning boil. And if it's healed, and in the place of
Wow, I think he froze up again. I was going to show you a picture of
that disease affects not only the surface of the skin, but underneath the nearby skin tissue. That boil affects skin tissue as well, and underneath. Then, and the hair thereof be turned white, the priest shall pronounce him unclean. So in the place of that boil, where that boil was, if those things come up where the skin is white and it damages, or it goes underneath the surface of the skin and the hair turns white, then he's unclean because of that boil. Remember, I just told you what a burning boil was. It's an infectious disease that attacks hair follicles and nearby skin tissue. And that's what turns it white, turns the hair follicles white. We'll talk about dilution gene too, because that's part of it. But that's what it's talking about. So now you're unclean, because now it's not just on the skin surface. Okay, it's affecting the tissue now. So now it becomes infectious. All right, go. Where we at? 21.
21. But if the priest look on it, and behold, there be no white hairs therein, and if it be not lower than the skin.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
I got messed up again. Read it again. 21. Read it
Okay,
again.
come. But if the priest look on it, and behold, there be no white hairs therein, and if it be not lower than the skin, but be somewhat dark, then the priest shall shut him up 7 days.
But if the priest look on it, and behold, no white hairs therein, and if it be not lower than the skin, so now we're going back to the beginning of that type of leprosy we're talking about. Remember what you had to have, the things you had to have.
Every time I start to talk, he comes back in. On Slacky, y'all. And you may have to remove yourself and then come back in, Ottawa.
Man, this is not cool.
Yeah, I know. You could, yeah. Go ahead, and then add, yeah. See if that works for a little bit. We're gonna keep it pushing. Oh, you good?
Okay. All right. So we were at what, 20, right? Leviticus chapter 13 and verse 20. No,
21. Yep.
But if the priest look on it, and behold, there be no white hairs therein. Remember, you needed the white hairs in order for it to be leprosy. That type of leprosy, the infectious type of leprosy, not the clean. And it be not lower than the skin. Remember, it had to affect the skin tissue as well underneath. This, if to be clean with the white patch, it had to be just skin level, surface. But be somewhat dark. Okay, remember we talked about the dark and the possibility of it healing. Then the priest shall shut him up 7 days. So you see, you don't got the boil, because remember in the verse before that, it said the boil was replaced by the white patch. So you don't got the boil, you don't got the hairs, the white hairs, and you don't got the destruction or the infection underneath the skin surface. So that's why the priest would shut him up and not automatically put him out the camp. We're going back to what he did in the beginning of the book, in the beginning of the chapter, where he had to see him. He shut him up for 7 days. 22.
22. If it spread much abroad in the skin, then the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is a plague. But if the bright spot stay in its place and spread not, it is a burning boil.
See that? And a burning boil. Remember what I said a burning boil was? It's an infection that affects the hair follicles and nearby skin tissue. Don't tell me the Most High don't know what he's talking about, man. Let me tell you something. Medical science, medicine and science, in what I know, is here's what I think. Here's what I know it is. All science and medicine is, especially science, medical science, is the Most High allowing you to understand how he did what he did. That's all it is. So you got the burning boil, the modern term for a certain type of leprosy. Most High described what it was way before Hansen did. So all it is the Most High allowing you to understand how he did what he did. That's what that is. That's what medicine and science is. Go.
Yeah. And the priest shall pronounce him unclean. 24. But if there be any flesh in the skin thereof, whereof there is a hot burning, and the quick flesh that burneth have a white bright spot, somewhat reddish or white, then the priest shall look upon it, and behold, if the hair in the bright spot be turned white, and it be in sight deeper than the skin, it is a leprosy broken out of the burning. Wherefore the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is a plague of leprosy.
Now, again, even if you didn't understand anything else, as long as you see that white hair, my dude, you got to go. Now, when it talks about the skin and the white and then the reddish burning, you'll see that in a lot of people who have really, really, really bad rashes, or what could be considered a rash. So they say. They have, if you notice, they have pretty much the same symptoms. But now, if you add the white hair with that, then that becomes, you become unclean at that point. Go ahead.
Okay. 26. And the priest shall look upon him, the seventh day, and if it be spread much abroad in the skin, then the priest shall.
Salat. Hold on. You reading 26?
26. Oh, you want no right here. Okay, cut. My bad. 26. But if the priest look on it, and behold, there be no white hair in the bright spot, and it be no lower than the other skin, but be somewhat dark, then the priest shall shut him up 7 days.
See that? So now we're just reiterating what happened in the earlier verses. It's giving you an understanding of what you cannot have and what you can have in order to be shut up or put out the camp. Now, mind you, all of it is leprosy. But leprosy is not just one thing. Because for what we know, in all intents and purposes, Miriam wasn't contagious, was she? Now, if she was, the scripture never said so, because it never described any of the symptoms that it's describing here. Yet she was put out the camp. So obviously she was put out the camp for another reason. Go ahead.
27. And the priest shall look upon him the seventh day, and if it be spread much abroad in the skin, then the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is the plague of leprosy.
Go ahead.
And if the bright spots stay in his place and spread not in the skin, but it be somewhat dark, it is a rising of the burning, and the priest shall pronounce him clean, for it is an inflammation of the burning.
See that? You see that? Now remember, even if it's just an inflammation and he's still clean, he's still a leper. Because what's one of the symptoms of leprosy? The beginning symptoms: inflammation, swelling. So you see how that all ties in? You're still a leper, but you're a clean leper. Go ahead.
Go. Verse 29. If a man or woman have a plague upon the head or the beard. Verse 30. Then the priest shall see the plague, and behold, if it be in sight deeper than the skin, and it be it in a yellow thin hair, then the priest shall pronounce him unclean.
Oh boy. Look at that. For all our sisters out here want to wear that blonde wig, look at that. So sad. So sad. They ain't say nothing about white hair. It said yellow. You are unclean, homie. You're unclean. And we killing ourselves to look like these people. You want to look like an unclean leper? Is that what you're telling me? Come on now. Do you know that when you're do you know that hair is alive? So when you put that wig on, that blonde wig, there's a chance that you're taking on an infection. Maybe on a micro organism scale. Who knows? But that's not something you want to take a chance on. Most High gave you beautiful hair. Gave all of us beautiful hair. Beautiful, strong hair. All right, so let's remember that, man. When we want to put on these, our women want to put on these blonde wigs, and you got the nerve to want to style it. How you styling leprosy hair? How do you style a leper's hair? That makes no sense to me, but most things don't. Let's go ahead. Let's move on with it. Do it.
God, I don't know. Let's see, they're a little thin there. So let me read it again. Then the priest shall see the plague, and behold, if it be in sight deeper than the skin, and there be it in a yellow thin hair, then the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is a dry skull, even a leprosy upon the head or beard for the fellas. Verse 31.
Mm-hmm.
And if the priest look not on the plague of the skull, and behold, it be not in sight deeper than the skin, and that there is no black hair in it, then the priest shall shut him up that hath the plague of the skull 7 days.
Now you see, it's going back into the same steps as before, except now we're talking about a skull or a type of scab. And we're not talking about any white hair now, because now also it's talking about different parts of the body as well. So, yeah. I'm glad, all praise to the Most High, we could put a stop to that. So yeah. So now it's talking about different part of the skin, different part of the body, and now we're getting the hairs involved for all those blonde hair freaks. Let's go. Go ahead.
34. And in the 7th day, the priest shall look on the skull, and behold, if the skull be not spread in the skin, nor be inside deeper than the skin, then the priest shall pronounce him clean, and he shall wash his clothes and be clean.
Okay, so now here's a question. If he was just pronounced clean, right? He didn't have he didn't have the leprosy or the symptoms of leprosy that made him unclean. Why wash the clothes? If he's clean, then the clothes should be clean. I don't know. I was just reaching right there. Let's go. Let's do it. Because it's going to talk about that in a minute. We're coming up on it. That's why I asked that question. I shouldn't have said nothing. I gave it away. All right, let's go.
Oh, okay. Okay. 35. But if the skull spread much in the skin after his cleaning, then the priest shall look on him, and behold, if the skull be spread in the skin, the priest shall not seek for yellow hair. He is unclean.
Right. Well, so now we don't need it. Now we do know that that's a symptom of that unclean leprosy. But remember, as we went back into the other verses, if it started to spread, then what you don't have to look for the yellow hair. It's spreading. The infection is spreading, which means sooner or later it's going to be contagious. So you have to be pronounced unclean. All right. So yeah, maybe. Let's do it.
Mm-hmm. 37. But if the skull be in his sight at a stay, and that there is a black hair grown up therein, the skull is healed. He is clean, and the priest shall pronounce him clean.
Okay, now why is that? What's the things that we need? Let's go back to the earlier verses. What's the one thing we need? The biggest thing in order for that man to be unclean. To be unclean. And I'm gonna give you a hint. It's dealing with the hair. Y'all put that in the comments, man. I'm not even gonna answer that question. Y'all put that in the comments. Let's go. Let's get it.
Okay, come. 37. No. 38. If a man also or a woman have the skin of their flesh bright spots, even white bright spots, then the priest shall look, and behold, if the bright spots in the skin of their flesh be darkish white, it is a freckled spot that groweth in the skin.
Yeah, we've seen that. We've seen that even with our people. I did have a picture of that, but because I was low on ink, I didn't realize I was low on ink. It didn't come out too good. Even though that is a symptom you're still clean. You know, it's not something that can be contagious. Because remember, at the end of the day, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about the difference between clean and unclean is contagious and not contagious. Because it's all leprosy. It's all that form of leprosy, different form of leprosy. Whether it be just the white skin, whether it be the white hair, whether it be, whatever. Hint, hint. That's because I like y'all. I just gave that hint. That's because I like y'all. All right, let's go, man. Let's do it.
Wanna say yellow hair. Wanna say yellow hair.
Yeah. That's one for a particular thing, though. But yeah, that wasn't what I was looking for, but that is part 2 of it. But go ahead, let's do it.
Verse 40. And the man whose hair is fallen off his head, he is bald, yet is he clean. And he that
a lot of us gonna be clean in a little while. We're get me a wig, but it ain't gonna be blonde.
God.
Let me get one of them James Brown jump offs with like the big, like the pompadour like that, where it don't move no matter how much you shake. That's the one I'm getting. Watch. Yeah, so it's still talking about that. Now, in this verse, it said he clean. It didn't even say or make the notion of whether it was still leprosy or not. Hint, hint, but let's go on. Keep it moving.
Come. Verse 41. And he that hath his hair fallen off from the part of his head towards his face, he is forehead bald, yet is he clean. And if there be in the bald head or bald forehead a white reddish sore, it is a leprosy sprung up in his bald head or his bald forehead.
Go ahead.
Then the priest shall look upon it, and behold, if the rising of the sore be white reddish in his bald head or in his bald forehead, as the leprosy appeareth in the skin of the flesh, he is a leprous man, he is unclean. The priest shall pronounce him utterly unclean. His plague is in his head.
Now I'm going to ask a question. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe I'm not saying that we're not afflicted with certain things. Obviously we are. But what was just described, in who do you see that the most? Especially in the head, around the elbows, in the back of the arms. Where do you see that the most? And who do you see that the most? You don't see that in us a lot. That's because we don't have leprosy in no form. In no form. Why do you think the Most High had to strike Miriam with it? He had to put that on her, like, hold this. We don't get that, man. We got too much melanin and all that good stuff in them, but that's another story. But there is, if you go into the medical books, you'll see who that strikes a lot and why. That's yes, eczema is also a form of leprosy. We're going to touch on that in a minute too.
And those people have that a lot.
But we do get that as well too. But a lot of that has to do with, from what I've seen, us not really taking care of our skin, not eating the right way, not eating healthy. A lot of things in the water and things like that. That from what I've seen, that affects us a lot because of those outside mitigating circumstances and factors. We just don't get it just to get it. But yeah, make no mistake about it. Our people do suffer from that as well. We do. It's weird though, because what they use to the medicines that they use to combat that, it's actually not good for us. We don't need those type of medicines to get underneath the skin. But I guess when we get to chapter 14, we'll talk about that, because I'm going to be doing 14 as well. Not tonight, obviously, but so yeah, eczema is definitely a form of eczema. I mean, leprosy. I'm going to be going through that if I can find my note on it. You already know, boy. Don't get old, y'all. All right, so let's go on. Let's do it.
Go. This is verse 45. And the leper in whom the plague is, his clothes shall be rent, his head bare, and he shall put a covering upon his upper lip, and shall cry, unclean, unclean.
Seems a bit harsh, but yeah, I'm not really sure why they had to do it that way. I mean, I looked into it. I didn't see. I'm not afraid to say I don't know. I didn't see, the reason for that part. Because he was already shaven, or he was already bald. He already rent his clothes, put on clean clothes or whatever. And now I understand why he had to scream that, why he had to yell that out. Because he probably was still in the camp, but technically he was supposed to be put out of the camp. So where would he be that he would need to say that? That one's a little puzzling. We'll get back to 45.
46. All the days wherein the plague shall be in him, he shall be defiled. He is unclean. He shall dwell alone. Without the camp shall his habitation be.
So maybe he had to shout that on his way out. So the people, so as he was moving past to go outside of the camp, the people who were in his path or around him would hear that and say, okay, and they would know to, make a hole, give him space, give that man some room. Because if you notice, all throughout from the beginning of the chapter, it talked about the things that made you clean and unclean. Here, it used different language. The language is a little stronger about this particular type of leprosy. Because look what it says. It says, he is a leprous man. He is unclean. The priest shall pronounce him utterly unclean. His plague is in his head. And the leper in whom the plague is, his clothes shall be ripped, and his head bare, and he shall put a covering upon his upper lip, and shall cry, unclean, unclean. Like, damn, what else was he outside of a leper? Because if you notice, the language is different. Like, it just seems like it was more serious. Because at no point in the other verses did it say anybody who was unclean had to yell, unclean, unclean. Except this particular form of leprosy.
Verse 47. The garment also that the plague of leprosy is in, whether it be a woolen garment or a linen garment, whether it be in the warp or woof of linen or of woolen, whether in a skin or anything made of skin.
Now, here we go. Now, if you remember earlier, I talked about, I said something about you're going to hear some strange words dealing with leprosy. And it was this particular thing. Before, it was talking about just the skin. The skin, the hair on the head, the eyebrows, the eye, those things, the beards. It was talking about that. We all know that once you're unclean, or whatever the case may be, or once you're pronounced clean, or whatever the case, when you got shut up or this, that, and the third, you would have the cleansing ritual. It talked about that in the beginning verses, about the cleansing ritual. We can go back to that in a minute. I'll go back to that, run over it again. Now it's talking about when a person like that is unclean to that point that it affects the clothes. Because remember, the main thing I said earlier when we first started was that leprosy was what? It was an infectious disease. It was contagious. That's why obviously people had to stay away. That's why they had their own towns and things of that nature, lepers. Even today, you'll find a lot of that in like Asia and India and places like that. You'll find a lot of that stuff. But yeah, they even had their own towns where only they could be. Now it's talking about the lepers, the contagious disease getting inside of the garments or your clothes. Now, this is a very strange thing here. When it talks about in verse 48, it says, whether it be in the warp or woof of linen or of woolen, whether in a skin or in anything made of skin, it's talking about yarn or thread that's woven in a certain pattern. I did have a picture of the pattern. I just wanted to show it to you if I can find it. Just give me one quick second. I did have a picture of the woof. Man, I did have a picture of the woof. Oh, like this. I don't know if y'all could see that. You probably can't see it. Look at that. See how that pattern is going?
I can show
lengthways and then crossways and then lengthways. So the warp is the pattern that's created by the yarn going lengthwise. And
snap.
Going side to side or left to right. So imagine this being yarn threaded in a pattern in somebody's garment. That's what the woof and the warp is talking about. That's what that is. So it says, read that again. 52.
Was it 52?
Was it 52 or was it
48?
48. Okay, go ahead.
Whether it be the warp or the woof of linen or of woolen, whether in a skin or anything made of skin. And if the plague be greenish or reddish in the garment or in the skin, either in the warp or in the woof or anything of skin, it is a plague of leprosy, and it shall be showed unto the priest.
Okay, so that's talking about if it got to that point where it's affecting the skin to the point where, now I don't know if you've ever seen anybody with a real bad infection, and sometimes you'll see a little bit of green in there in that cut or in that infection. And sometimes it'll ooze out into the clothes, or it might stick onto your clothes. That's what it's talking about. So you got to show that to the priest, because you still may be clean. Not. All right, let's go.
50. And the priest shall look upon the plague and shut it up that hath the plague 7 days.
See that? So now I said not, but well, I knew what the scripture said because I read it earlier. He had to be shut up 7 days. So there still had to be a determination made of whether or not that person was unclean. Now that's confusing, because when you look at other parts of the scripture, it's like, wait a minute. It was talking about boils with raw flesh, and you was knocking cats out the can. But it's going to show you in a minute. Go ahead.
51. And he shall look on the plague the 7th day. If the plague be spread in the garment, either in the warp or in the woof or in the skin or in any work that is made of skin, the plague is a fretting leprosy. It is unclean.
Now, remember what we said about earlier about it spreading. When you go back into the first beginning verses, if it spread on the surface of the skin or underneath the skin, then that automatically made that person unclean, because it was what? Again, contagious. You could catch it. You could catch it. Now, when it talks about a fretting leprosy, you need to understand what that is. Now, what that is like a fungus. All right, it's almost like a malignant fungus that can get on your clothes.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, that like a malignant fungus type that can get on your clothes. Now, what does fungus do? It spreads. Fungus spreads. So that person would be declared unclean just because of that. Now, already we know what's going to happen to the clothes. But let's go on. So wait, before you go on, is that understood? If it gets into the clothes where it's spread from the skin on the surface, underneath the surface, and all the other symptoms that go with it, and it gets onto the clothes and it starts to spread on the clothes as a fretting leprosy, which is a malignant fungus that spreads, then that person is obviously unclean. Go ahead.
God. 52. I think it was 52. He shall therefore burn that garment.
See that? He didn't even say wash it. He didn't even say wash it. He said burn it. Because see, in the other examples, it hadn't spread. It wasn't a fretting leprosy. Remember, you got the burning boil, you got the fretting leprosy, you got different things. The skull, you got the scab, you got different levels, if you will, of that. And those different levels call for different actions. And that's what the priest had to determine. That's why the priest had to be so close to the Most High. And that's why the priest had so much power and he was to be listened to. And that's also why Yahushua spoke on the priests. When the scriptures talk about, when it talks about the gates thereof languish, it was talking about back then and our so-called leaders today. We got a running joke. I know I got the running joke with one of a really, I like this brother a lot. Levi brother Yediah, and I'm always saying, hey man, it's y'all fault that we in this mess, because y'all went off, and then he don't like that though, but but the priest was a very important person, man, and he got his instructions directly from the Most High. You know what I mean? Via the word, obviously, the written word of the Most High's thoughts and actions and being. And so when they went off, man, it was no hope for us. But yeah, back to this. So this person's clothes had to be burned because the type of leprosy that he had, the fretting leprosy, which is a fungus that spreads, it spread into the wool, into the garment. And those patterns that we were talking about, the wart and the wolf, the way they interlock sort of like this, they get into, they get deep into the fabric. Because remember, it's woven really, really tight to make that pattern. Yeah, there you go. Yeah,
something like that.
Yeah. I knew somebody had a better picture. I'm not the picture king, You see that? So now we're talking about all these little hiding spaces for that fungus to grow. You got to burn that. So that's what that is. And so this person had to not only, do that. That was part of the ritual cleaning. However, he was unclean. So no matter what, he had to burn those garments, no matter what. All right.
Let me finish 52. So, verse 52.
Yeah, you know what? Go back to 49. Start from 49 again.
Oh, God.
Yeah, start from 49 again.
It's the book of Leviticus, chapter 13. Just for y'all that don't know, we on verse 49. And if the plague be greenish or reddish in the garment, or in the skin, either in the warp or in the woof, or anything of skin, it is a plague of leprosy, and it shall be showed unto the priest. And the priest shall look upon the plague and shut up it that hath the plague 7 days. And he shall look on the plague on the 7th day. If the plague be spread in the garment, either in the warp or in the woof, or in the skin, or any work that is made of skin, the plague is a fretting leprosy, and it is unclean.
Okay, so now, just to be clear, it wasn't when it was describing what type of leprosy and the skin color and the green. It wasn't talking about it spreading in the garment yet, in the wool yet. That's why the priest had to look on it to see. He had to see if it spread. You know, the 7 days or whatever. He lock him up. This, that, and the 30 locks him up, and then after he looks at it.
Oh, that was good. Levi.
Shalom, Shabbat Shalom. After he looks at that, then he makes a determination once he sees that, okay, the greenish or the yellows, the infection is spreading not only in the skin but also into the garment. There's no washing that out the garment. How do we know? How do we know that there's no washing that out the garment? Just from the scriptures alone. How do we know? Anybody? Real simple answer. Take a stab at it, Barack.
Because it said to burn it.
That was a good one. Yeah, that's true. That wasn't quite what I was looking for, but yeah, that's exactly right. It told you what to do with it. If you could wash it, it would have said it, like it did in all the other verses that it mentioned it. So again, now we're going from those type of that type of leprosy to, like, say, leprosy 3rd class to like maybe leprosy 2nd class now, because now it's talking about burning stuff. Before it was talking about, look, man, just wash this, wash that, you know what I mean? Shave your head off, whatever, this, that, and the third. Now it's talking about setting fire to stuff. Because as we all know, fire is a cleansing agent. I mean, it's a killing agent too, but it's a killing and a cleansing agent. It'll kill the infection and it'll cleanse whatever it burns. That's why the Most High is called a consuming fire. But anyway, so those clothes had to be burned, especially. And the reason it mentioned the woof and the warp is because those things are the way that the picture shows, the way that it's woven so tightly that fungus could spread into the actual fibers of the yarn, and there's no getting that out. There's no washing that out. So that's why it had to be burned. All right, go to where were we? 52. Go to 52. Read 52 again.
This is verse 52. He shall therefore burn that garment, whether warp or woof, in woolen or in linen, or anything of skin wherein the plague is, for it is a fretting leprosy. It shall be burnt in the fire.
Now, what we said a fretting leprosy was a fungus, a malignant fungus, and we all know that fungus spreads. Now, there are good funguses which we may find in, for instance, mushrooms, things like that, and then there's this type of fungus. So that's what a fretting leprosy is. You can look it up. It may have some other things, but that's the gist of it. That's what it is. Basically a fungus, something that spreads, infectious. 54.
Then the priest shall command that they wash the thing wherein the plague is, and he shall shut it up 7 days more.
Now, obviously, it wasn't talking about his clothes because it said it got to be burnt. It got to be burnt. Let's go back to it. 51 and 52.
And he shall look on the plague the 7th day, if the plague be spread in the.
Go back to, let's go back to the 49. Go to 49.
Leviticus chapter 13, verse 49. And if the plague be greenish or reddish in the garment or in the skin, either in the warp or in the woof or in anything of skin, it is a plague of leprosy, and it shall be showed unto the priest.
So we're talking about wool garments. We're talking about if you're wearing leather. We're talking about, whatever they were wearing back then, bear skin or wildebeest skin or Godzilla skin or whatever kind of skins they were wearing. We're talking about that as well. Right? Go on.
And the priest shall look upon the plague and shut it up that hath the plague 7 days.
Go ahead.
He shall look upon the plague the 7th day. If the plague be spread in the garment, either in the warp or in the woof or in the skin or any work that is made of skin, the plague is a fretting leprosy, and it is unclean.
Okay, so we got that part. Fretting leprosy, it's spread in the woof and the warp and any type of skin. Not only your skin, but whatever animal skin you were wearing. We got that. Go.
52. He shall therefore burn that garment, whether warp or woof, in the woolen or in linen or anything of skin wherein the plague is. It is a fretting leprosy, and it shall be burnt in the fire.
See that? So we got that. Let's push that to the side. That's got to be burnt. Go.
53. And if the priest shall look and behold, the plague be not spread in the garment, either in the warp or in the woof or in anything of skin, then the priest shall command that they wash the thing wherein the plague is.
See that? See that? So that's the distinction right there. If it didn't spread in that, which is basically obvious. If it's in there, burn it. If it's not, wash it. I mean, just, there's not a lot of verbal clutter there. But that's the steps that had to be taken. And that's to show you also how serious certain forms of leprosy can be. Go ahead.
And he shall shut it up 7 days more. End of verse. 55. And the priest shall look on the plague after that it is washed, and behold, if the plague have not changed his color, and the plague be not spread, it is unclean. Thou shalt burn it in the fire. It is fret inward. It is fret inward. It is fret inward.
Read it again.
Yeah, let's read it. Woo! Okay. Verse 55. And the priest shall look on the plague after that it is washed. And behold, if the plague have not changed its color, and the plague be not spread, it is unclean. Thou shalt burn it in the fire. It is a fret inward, whether it be bare within or without.
So basically, you understand, look, there is no cleaning that. There is no cleaning that. Because remember, if you go back, it said if it's greenish or yellowish or reddish, and it gets inside of the fibers and you wash that, or it gets on the skin, rather, I'm sorry. If it gets in the fibers, obviously you got to burn that. Obviously you got to burn that. But it's talking about if it be not changed its color, then it's unclean. So now what color is it supposed to be? Go back to what we were talking about with the leprosy. And before we get to that, let me just say we got to make there is a distinction between leprosy, a leper, and a person with albinism, and even a person with dilution gene. Because if you remember, if you look at it, both can be, you can both of them, you can have white color. You can have white colored skin with albinism and with leprosy. But here's the difference. Leprosy is infectious, it's contagious, not albinism. So you can have black people who are albinos and still be clean lepers. We go back to that. We go back to Miriam. We go back to, what's that dude?
King Uzziah.
Uzziah, Naaman. What about that dude? Naaman.
Yeah,
what about that dude? We go back to these people who were, in fact, clean lepers. I mean, this dude was the captain of the host of the army of Syria, the king of Syria. Now, obviously, you know, when you look at the story, he wanted to be, he wanted to be healed of his leprosy or whatever the case may be. But they shouldn't have took that little Israelite girl for a servant. His wife shouldn't have done that, but that's another story. We'll get into that, I guess, some other time. So yeah, hold on a second. Give me 1 second. I gotta plug my oh man, I gotta plug my battery in, man.
Yeah, but I think verse 55, you said that the plague have not changed its color.
Yeah, I'm gonna get right to that. Give me 1 second. Let me just.
Okay, go.
So yeah, I can't find my. Yeah, I messed this up. All right, we got it. Booyah! There you go. See that? The devil is a liar, baby. The devil is a liar. The devil's a liar.
Yo, shalom, brother.
Shalom. Snub nose 51. All right. Don't know what that means, but all right. I know what snub nose is. All right. So let's go back to that. Let's go back to where were we? Where was
we?
55.
55.
Go back to
49.
No, go back to 52. No, 51. Go back to 51. Let's give because I think this is a little confusing. So let's go back to 51.
Okay, come. This is Leviticus 13 for everybody joining us. We're going to verse 51. And he shall look on the plague on the seventh day. If the plague be spread in the garment, either in the warp or in the woof or in the skin or in any work
or in a skin or an skin, right? Because it's talking about different types of garments.
Oh, okay, come. Or in a skin or in any work that is made of skin, the plague is a fretting leprosy. It is unclean.
Right.
He shall therefore burn that garment, whether warp or woof, in woolen or in linen, or in anything of skin, wherein the plague is. For it is a fretting leprosy; it shall be burnt in the fire.
So that if it's determined that it's a fretting leprosy, it has to be burned. If it's a fretting leprosy, and he just gave you the symptoms of a fretting leprosy, so we got that. That's been established. Now go on.
53. If the priest shall look and behold, the plague be not spread in the garment, either in the warp or in the woof or in anything of skin, then the priest shall command that they wash the thing wherein the plague is, and he shall shut it up 7 days more.
Okay.
And
go ahead. Salah, my bad.
No, good. Okay, come. Verse 55. And the priest.
So now, wait, Salah. So now, if the plague be not spread in the garment, the woof, and the warp, and all that other stuff, then he's going to be shut up like before in the earlier verses. You're going to shut him up to 7 days. Now we're back to the completion of the 7 days, and the priest got to check on him again. Go ahead. 54.
54. Then the priest shall command that they wash the thing wherein the plague is, and he shall shut it up 7 days more.
Okay.
And then, okay.
So now you got to wash the dude. You got to wash all that other stuff, and then you're going to shut them up 7 more days. Now remember, it said if it didn't spread into the garment, you're going to shut them up, and then then the priest got to look at them, and then then the 7 more days. Now watch.
55. And the priest shall look on the plague after that it is washed, and behold, if the plague have not changed its color, and the plague be not spread, it is unclean. Thou shalt burn it in the fire. It is a fret inward, whether it be bare within or without.
Got that? It's just the same steps. It's following the same steps as it did earlier. The priest sees a certain infection, whatever, certain type of leprosy. He determines, okay, it is leprosy, but we're not sure yet if it's unclean or clean. Let me shut him up for 7 days. You've given the leprosy time to do whatever it's going to do so that he can make the final determination of whether you clean or unclean, because we already know you got the leprosy. So he shuts you up. Now he's saying with this fretting leprosy, if the yellowish and the greenish thing be on your skin and on your clothes and in the wolf and all this kind of stuff, if it's in the garment, that garment has to be burned.
Cool.
Now it's saying, now it goes on to say, if it's not in the wolf and the wolf and in the skin like that, then they're going to shut you up for 7 days. Priest comes back after the completion. 7 is a completion. He comes back, okay, and he says what? And that's after the cleaning, after you clean it. Because he'll say, okay, well, look, it's not in this, it's not in that, so let's do the cleansing. Let's do the ritual cleansing. Now, after the cleansing, okay, it says what? And the priest shall look on the plague after that it is washed, and behold, if the plague had not changed his color, and the plague be not spread, it is unclean. Thou shalt burn it to the fire. It's really a little, I know it's a little confusing. It is a little confusing because I think what people are looking at is it talked about the cleansing after it talked about burning the garment. But remember, we weren't only talking about he's not only talking about the garment, he's also talking about the man himself. You're not going to burn the man. You're going to set the man on fire? So it's talking about 2 different things. Or it's including the man inside of that. So that's what you got to look at. And here's the funny part about it. This is the only one where it talks about if it be not spread, it's still unclean. Because remember, it already got into the fibers. But it's talking about the man. All right. Let's go to
56.
56.
56.
Now watch this one.
And if the priest look, and behold, the plague be somewhat dark after the washing of it, then he shall rend it out of the garment, or out of the skin, or out of the warp, or out of the wolf.
So now it's saying that because remember it said before, if it doesn't change its color, it's unclean. Now it's saying if you wash it, after you wash it, and I looked at it, and it get kind of dark after the washing of it, which means it's changing its color.
Mm-hmm.
So now you want to try to see if you can get it out of the garment. But now watch what it says now. Watch. Go to 57.
And if it appears still in the garment, either in the warp or in the woof, or in anything of skin, it is a spreading plague. Thou shalt burn that wherein the plague is with fire.
See that? So it's giving you certain steps with this particular fretting leprosy. It's talking about color changing or color not changing, spreading or not spreading, where it is in the fabric or the skin, or if it didn't spread, or if it didn't get in the if it's just on the skin, or if it spread to the fabric from the skin, any part of the skin, any part of the fabric. But then it says, well, wait a minute, if it's not, if it's changing color and it's getting a little darker after you washed it, after you try to wash it out, and it's getting a little darker, what does it say? You'll try to get it out of you'll try to get it out. Now, I don't know how they're going to get it out. They said rend it out. I don't know, what's that, ripping it out or cutting it out? That I'm not sure how they're getting it out. But the steps is you're going to rend it out of, you know what? You're going to rend it out of the garment. Here's what I'm going to do right now, just so we can get an understanding.
Yeah, to rend, the meaning of it?
Yep, that's exactly where I'm going. Because all right. It says to remove from place. No, that can't be it. To remove from place by violence. I know you ain't gonna beat up your to split or tear apart in pieces. To tear. To lacerate mental. No. Okay, so because we know to rend is to tear apart. As we know that when bad things happened, the people used to rend their clothes and put ashes on their face during mourning. So we know that means to rip. So maybe it's talking about ripping it out. If anybody has a better breakdown of that, put it up there. But that's what to me, that's what it's saying. That you have to try to rip that out some kind of way. And that's talking about after it looks kind of dark after washing it or after washing the person. But it's not talking about ripping the person, obviously. But if it still appears in the garment after you washed it, then it's what they call a spreading plague or a spreading. It's almost like a fungus, a spreading fungus. And so you gotta burn it. Even if you try to tear it out, or maybe they took knives and cut little pieces out where the color might have been a little, where the color was on it, where the fungus got into the garment. But the biggest thing is washing it. And if that color was there, even if it got a little darker or whatever the case may be, you would still have to cut it out because it's spread already. It's spread already. So that garment wouldn't be any good anyway.
Cool.
But see, now here's the weird part. Read 58. This one is baffling me.
Verse 58, and the garment, either warp or woof, or whatsoever thing of skin it be, which thou shalt wash, if the plague be departed from them, then it shall be washed the second time and shall be clean.
So now, obviously, you can't get rid of that plague. It's not a spreading, a spreading plague. See, they're talking about different steps for different types of plagues and what the plague is actually doing. So if the plague is on your skin, in a nutshell, if it's on your skin, underneath the skin, it's greenish, it's yellowish, that type of thing, then, obviously, it's that plague. Now they're saying if it gets into the garment, into any part of the garment, like inside of the garment and in the woof and the warp, and in the strands and things of that nature, is saying that what? He shall therefore burn that garment, whether warp or woof, in woolen or in linen, or in anything of skin wherein the plague is, for it is a fretting leprosy. Now we know, we said again, the fretting leprosy was a spreading fungus. So that's what that part is talking about. Then it goes on to say, if the priest shall look and behold the plague be not spread into the garment, either in the warp or the woof, then you'll wash the garment and then you shut it up for 7 more days. That's if the plague hasn't spread to the garment. Not that if it's not on your skin. We've already established that you already have that on your skin and underneath your epidural. But then it goes on to say again, because this is a little baffling. It says, then the priest shall look on the plague after that it is washed. Now that's not, remember, it's only washed if the plague hasn't spread into the garment. That's when it's washed, according to the word. And behold, if the plague have not changed his color, and the plague be not spread, it is unclean. Thou shalt burn it in the fire. It is fret inward, whether it be bare within or without. So it gives those steps if the plague has spread to the garment or if it didn't spread to the garment. If it spread to the garment inside the woof and the warp and it has that color, it gets burned. If it hasn't spread, it gets washed. But then if the color hasn't changed, it gets burned. That's a bit weird.
Yeah.
All right, go back to 56.
56. If the priest look and behold, the plague be somewhat dark after the washing of it, then he shall rend it out of the garment, or out of the skin, or out of the warp, or out of the woof.
So you'll try to I don't know, I guess beat it out, or against a rock, or however they rend it out, however they tear it out, however they get it out of the garment. You're supposed to try to get it out of the garment. All right, go on.
And if it appears still in the garment, either in the warp or in the woof or in anything of skin, it is a spreading plague. Thou shalt burn that wherein the plague is with fire.
So if it's in the garment gets burnt. If it didn't spread to the garment gets washed, and then you watch 7 more days. You watch 7 days. After that 7 days, if after the cleansing, if it's in the garment, but it changes the color and it gets a little dark, then it's a spreading, leprosy, and it's a fret inward, and you're supposed to burn the garment. You try to rend it out first. Try to get it out some kind of way. If you can't get it out, then you got to burn the garment. So basically, you're going to burn the garment. You got to burn it. If it starts to spread, whatever the leprosy is, the spreading leprosy or the fretting leprosy, you have to burn it out. You have to burn the garment. And the man is unclean. 58.
And the garment, either warp or woof or whatsoever thing of skin it be, which thou shalt wash, if the plague be departed from them, then it shall be washed the second time and shall be clean.
Now obviously that's if you were able to get the plague out of it, because it does talk about burning twice. So it's a different level of, that spreading virus or that spreading leprosy. So if it's in the garment, and it spreads, you got to burn it. If it's in the garment, but it's not spreading, and there's something with the color, some kind of color change, you can wash it.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can wash it and try to get it out after that. Now, after the cleansing, if, as it just said, if it appear in a garment, either in the warp or the woof or anything to skin it, it is a spreading plague, and now shall burn it. Now, this is already after you tried to wash it. This is already after you try to rend it out. Now, once you can't rend it out, then that's when it's talking about you gotta burn it. But now it's talking about if you wash it out and the plague goes out of it, then you wash it again, and the person becomes clean after that. So if it's a garment that's on the skin, I mean, if it's a plague that's on the skin, then the priest got to pronounce you. If that same greenish yellowish plague gets on the garment and inside of the fibers, and it's that infectious spreading virus, that fungus, it's got to be burned. If it's not, if it doesn't get on the garment or inside of the because sometimes you can get it on the surface of a garment, but not inside of the fibers. You know what I mean? You can get it on the surface, but not inside. So if it gets on the garment at that point, but it hasn't spread, you can try to wash it. After you wash it and you see the color hasn't changed, then it's unclean. Now, obviously, it says the priest got to look at you 7 more days, and then if it doesn't change its color, it's unclean, and then you got to burn it after that. But then it goes on to say, because it's an inward, it's a fret inward. And then it goes on to say, if he looks on you, if the priest looks on you and it be somewhat dark after the washing of it, after you washed it, then
it's going to rend it out of the garment.
Right, you got to try to rend it out of the garment. But if it's still in the garment, then it's a spreading plague, and you got to burn it.
Yep.
Now, if you're able to get it out of the garment, you'll wash it. The priest looks on it, you wash it again, and then he'll pronounce you clean if it came out. So there's no color or trace of it in the garment. And then you pronounce clean after the second time of washing it, because you got to wash it the first time. You get it out. You wash it. You get it out. The priest has to look at it again. You wash it again, and then he pronounces you clean. Well, the garment clean. 59.
This is the law of the plague of leprosy in a garment of woolen or linen, either in the warp or the woof, or anything of skins, to pronounce it clean or to pronounce it unclean.
So unclean, it gets burned unless it's able to come out. And then it gets washed and pronounced clean. So if it's in the fabric, it's interwoven within the fabric, it's got to be burned. If it doesn't spread, then you can try to wash it. You wash it and it don't spread, you try to rend it out. If you're not able to rend it out, then you gotta. It's a spreading plague at that point. It's a spread. It's spread. Yeah, it's spread at that point, and that's got to be burned. But if you're able to get it out, then you do a series of ritual washings. The priest looks at it again. You wash it again, and if it's gone, if he pronounces it gone, then he can pronounce you clean. Or he pronounces the garment or the skin or whatever it is clean. we're definitely going to go back over that one again. But again, there are different types of leprosies is what we see, and this chapter is giving you an understanding of what's clean and what's unclean. How do you pronounce it, and most importantly, what you look for. Because as we've seen, except with these last couple of verses, which I'm going to go over again, and I'm going to leave this part. I'm going to go over this again when I do 14. I'm going to do this part and then jump right into 14. But what it showed you was not only did you have to you had to understand what leprosy was in order to pronounce a person clean or unclean. But you had to know what the symptoms were. And then you also had to see that there were many forms of leprosy. We've already said, I guess the best example is Miriam, where the scripture says where she basically just turned white. It also talked about here in the 13th chapter about the body turning all white and the priest pronouncing you clean. So we know that that's exactly what happened to Miriam. That's the type of leprosy that she had. Now, she was still put out of the camp. But obviously that had to be for a different reason, because the scripture never stated whether or not she had boils or yellow hair or anything like that. So she was put out for a different reason. And also that is part of it too. I want to touch on that again. When you look at our sisters, man, and they put in this blonde hair, in their head, it's like that's a form of leprosy. That is a form of leprosy. And whether you want to believe it or not, Esau is a leper. A lot of them are clean lepers, but he's a leper. Because even if he didn't have the boils and the the reddish skin, which they do, even if they didn't have that, you got the blonde hair and you got the complete lack of melanin. You got the what they call the dilution gene. Now we do have our people who have albinism, but again, albinism is different than leprosy. It's a form of leprosy because they both, especially the color, when you look at the color. But one is infectious and one is not in those days, back in those days. And they're considered, Esau, they're considered clean lepers. They're considered clean lepers. And even and to be honest, yeah. When you look at it, our people too who have albinism are considered clean lepers, can be considered clean lepers. Because it is a form of leprosy. And the biggest thing with leprosy is the void of pigmentation. So that's why when you start talking about albinism or what's that other one that Michael Jackson had, that's if you look at it, that's a real thing. I forget the name of it though.
I can look it up.
Yeah, something like that. I forget. No, I thought if I said that I'd be able to, it'll come to mind, but it didn't. That didn't work. I forget what it's called.
Vitiligo or something like that.
Yeah, vitiligo or something like that.
Yeah, there we go. I can't pronounce it.
But you got to remember too. See, but now that you go in deeper, because now there are different types of albinism. Vitiligo was one type. Then you got OCA 1A. You got they're like different types of albinism. So that's even a deeper thing. But it's all a form of leprosy. And again, like we said earlier, when you were showing the pictures earlier, you have those lepers who don't have limbs or who are deformed, things like that. That's a serious contagious form of leprosy. And then you got the harmless ones like turning all white, like being an albino. As far as leprosy is concerned, Esau might be a clean leper, but he's a dirty dude anywhere else. And so, when you're looking at all these guys in their Armani suits and these broads in these dresses, and they got their nice, they got their hairstyle nice, and it's all blonde, man, that's a disease, homie. You don't want to do that. You don't want to put that on your head, because it talked about different forms of leprosy that affect the hair follicles. You know what I'm saying? And I'm not talking about like when your hair turns white when you get old. I mean, we know why that happens. You know what I'm saying? With your molecules, when they start to produce less and less, and they start to lose, those molecules start to lose that strength and that ability to create pigment, and so your hair starts to turn white. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about the disease that expressly affects your hair follicles.
Mm-hmm.
And that type of leprosy that turns your follicles, your hair, yellow, not white, not silver, yellow. That's a straight up disease. So, if I were you, sisters, don't put that stuff in your hair, man. Most High knew what he was doing. He gave you, even if you don't got a whole lot of hair. You know what I mean? Kind of style that. You know what I mean? Tell people you got a really, really big part. That's all. Whatever you got to do. Whatever you got to do. Whatever you got to do. And guys, they make hats. You know what I mean? You ain't got to put on them wigs and them blonde wigs and all that. Because it is a form of leprosy. And it was used, believe it or not, when you look at leprosy was used when the Most High wanted to correct somebody. When you transgress this law, that's what he hit you with, among other things that he could have done. That's what he hit you with. He hit Miriam with that whiteness, and then he had to put out the camp. When you look at it, yeah, look at that. Now that might be considered the vitiligo. I don't know the name of it. I'm sorry. I think I butchered it.
Yeah, no, I think that's how you spell it. Yeah, but this is Winnie.
That.
Yeah, this is the Winnie Harlow right here.
So Winnie Harlow, yeah, technically, yeah. Yeah, technically. Now, had she been all white, they would have considered that probably albinism. But it still would have been a form of leprosy if you put leprosy under the absence of pigmentation. Then yeah, she still would have been considered having leprosy. But again, the albinism is not from an infectious standpoint. It's not infectious. It's not contagious. There are no boils. There are no sores. There's no pus. There's no white hairs. There's none of that. Although you would get that in albinism, but again, you would still need the infectious part of it to be, that contagious leprosy. So yeah, that's it in a nutshell. I'm going to be doing. I'm not sure yet when I'm going to be doing it, but I'm going to continue on in the book of Leviticus, and I'm going to do Most High will, and I'm going to do 14. Barak and I are going to do 14, and yeah, we're gonna have some fun with it, man. We're gonna have some fun with it. I think when you look at, and also too, I was looking up something called leucism, and that's when you got a permanent loss of pigment, like a complete permanent loss of pigment. I haven't nailed it down yet, so I'll probably put that on with 14 when I go through the back part of 13 and into 14. But there's so many different types of things that's going on when it's dealing with leprosy, that it's amazing. Yeah, that's all I got. I enjoyed doing this though. I hope it sheds some light on some of the people that we look at and some of the people that we look up to, who don't look like us. And I hope it gives some kind of understanding for the people who do look like us. And even with that type of condition, how merciful the Most High is.
Yeah.
Because none of the people that we know, at least that I know, and I know quite a few people who have albinism, and none of them have them sores, or like they ain't got like half a foot or nothing like that, or what I mean. There's none of that. So that in itself was merciful. And remember, in order for you to have albinism, both parents got to have that gene. So yeah, I hope everybody enjoyed it. Again, like I said, we're gonna come back and do 14 as we continue with the Torah portion. Yeah, so just see us back here, same bat time, same bat station. Hey, may the Most High bless and keep y'all. Ashar Shabbat, and Most High we'll see you soon. Shalom.
Shalom.